us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever.
Feel the stillness. Feel the peace. Feels so good. Bobby invited you to set aside the things that you brought that you were holding in your hands or in your lap. I'm going to invite you to set aside any problem or concern or question that you might have, any worry. Just set it aside, knowing that you can pick it up at any time. While we're here in the silence, as we go into the silence, I'd like you to take some thoughts with you. I'm going to say an affirmation. I'm going to invite you to repeat it silently to yourself. I am loved. I am lovable. I am a precious child of God. God is always present for me. I deserve to be happy. The things I've asked you to say to yourself are the things that still small voice inside is always trying to say to you. So as we go into the silence, let those thoughts of love, being a child of God, let those permeate your being in the silence. And so, gently and easily, take a deep breath and go into the silence. just as gently and easily as we slipped into the silence, we return our attention to this rest. We come back knowing that we have made conscious contact with the mind of God. It might not have seemed like a long time, but there is no time or space in the mind of God. Any contact is just perfect. Lord, we thank you, God. Thank you, God. And so it is. Amen.
Why should I feel discouraged? And why should the shadows come? And why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is He. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know He watches over me. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. Let not our hearts be troubled. His tender words I hear, and resting on God's goodness, we lose all doubt and all fear. Though by the path God leadeth, but one step we need take. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know He watches over me. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Well, I sing because I'm happy. Well, I sing because I'm free. For his eye is on the sparrow, and I know, he watches me.
So, Perry, your spirit and your energy have blessed us. I feel like I've been to church. And I was sitting over here watching the piano, and it was sort of vibrating, visibly vibrating, and I hadn't always seen that. So my top title this morning is God is Great. And as I thought about that, and I select these titles. Kathleen sends me this email, Beth, what are you going to talk about? And I make up something. I just make it up. And then I kind of look around and try to make it happen. And I'm thinking, God, it's great. And I look at the TV and I see all these pictures of the war, and it just in the Middle East, and it just, how am I going to talk about God is great? I mean, don't you ever feel like we have this belief that God is great, and we know our unity principles, and then we look there and we see all that stuff, and it's really hard. It's hard to remember our spiritual principles. It's hard to stay out of the world, to keep our focus where we need it to be. I want to acknowledge that because I think we're all there. I think that there's stuff going on. We've had the war between Romania and Russia, and we've seen those horrible pictures, and we now have seen the pictures of Israel and Gaza, and we can't help but be touched. We can't help but have a moment of question. How can I make this better? And unity is taught over and over that you and I can change the world if we change our consciousness. Isn't that a heavy load? You see that and you think, oh, God, how am I going to do that? And so the spiritual law that I'm going to talk about is the spiritual law of substitution. It means that the way to get rid of a certain thought, a certain problem, a certain pattern is to change to something different, to substitute. And there's no way to dismiss a thought directly. I cannot say to myself, I'm not going to think about what I'm seeing on television without thinking about it. I can't say I'm not going to think about a pink elephant and not think about a pink elephant. But the law is that if something is difficult and it's going on and we want to change, we get to make that choice to change, to think about something better, good, good, better, best. Best would be to think about God. Better might be to think about chocolate. Whatever it takes. Best would be to think about God. Positive mental energy and positive thinking does not mean that we think unrealistically. It doesn't mean that we practice what I call spiritual bypass. And have you ever met somebody that was just so happy and everything was so good that no matter what happened, they were just pretending that what is isn't? Um, we don't do that in unity. We look at it, we say, this is what is, and we're going to change it. Um, if we spot a problem, we're honest about it. If we know that we have inner work to do, we do that inner work. But we don't dwell, we don't camp out in the negative parts of our experience. So what I know is that we teach that whatever we think about increases. And so I know that if I keep thinking about the people in Israel and Gaza in a negative way, that I am perpetuating the negative situation. So it's putting this substitution practice in action that becomes hard, particularly when we have events in our life that appear less than good. It might be one of the reasons we say our weather blessing. It might be a no thank you note from somebody where we've applied for a job or a loan. It might be the end of a relationship or the loss of a loved one. All these things come to challenge our belief system. They can cause us to groan and complain. And almost all of these would help us forget to say that God is, this is great. So this morning I want to talk about what we need to do when these things occur in our life. And I remembered a story that I had told in 1998. And what I'm going to say is God is great when you can put up in your search bar, be twins, and it pulls the story up. So this is a story, and it's told from the author's point of view. Jerry was the kind of guy that some people love to hate, always in a good mood with something positive to say. If you ask him what he was doing, he would reply, "Hey, if I was any better, I'd be twins." He was a unique kind of restaurant manager. He had several waiters that would follow him. If he changed jobs, they would go with him. And the reason they followed him is because he was a natural motivator. If they were having a bad day, he was there encouraging them. And if there was something that was going wrong, he was curious about it and positive that it could be changed. The author asked Jerry, "I don't get it. You can't be a positive person all the time. How do you do it?" And Jerry replied, "Every morning I wake up and I say to myself, I have two choices today. I have the choice to be in a good mood or the choice to be in a bad mood. And every day I make a conscious choice to be in a good mood. Each time something happens today that looks bad, I have a choice. I can choose to be the victim or I can choose to learn from it. And every morning before I get out of bed, I choose to learn from every experience today. Every time somebody comes to me complaining, I choose to accept their complaining, or I can pause and point out the positive side of life. I make a conscious choice to look for the positive in everything. And the author said, well, sure, that's not easy. And Jerry said, yeah, it is. It's easy. When you cut away all the junk, every situation is a choice. And you are the only one who can choose how you react. You're the one responsible for how you react. You can choose how people will affect you. You can choose to be in a good mood or a bad mood. The bottom line is really your choice, how you choose to live. The author said that he left the restaurant industry and didn't see Jerry for a few years, but that every time he had to make a choice, he would think about Jerry, and he would remember that he had a choice of responding or reacting. And several years later, he heard that Jerry did something that you're not supposed to do in the restaurant business, and that was if he was there by himself and he left the back door unlocked. And some armed robbers came in, and while he was trying to open the safe, his hand was shaking so much he messed up the combination, and one of the robbers was nervous and panicked and shot him. Luckily, he was found relatively quickly, and he was rushed to a local trauma unit. And after 18 hours of surgery and weeks of intensive care, he was released from surgery from the hospital still with some bullets in his body, pieces of bullets. The author said he saw Jerry 6 months after the accident, and he asked him how he was. And he said, hey, if I was any better, I'd be twins. You want to see my scars? The author said, no, I don't really need to see the scars, but tell me what went through your mind when the robbery took place. He said, well, the first thing that went through my mind is I realized that I'd done the number one wrong thing, that's leave the door open. But as I lay there on the floor, I remembered I had two choices. I could live or I could die. Were you scared? Did you lose consciousness? Jerry continued, well, I was really impressed by the paramedics. They were really good. They kept reassuring me over and over again that things were going to be fine, that I was going to be fine. But then they rolled me into the emergency room, and I looked at the faces of the nurses and the doctors, and they were looking at me like I was a dead man. And I knew I needed to take action quickly. What you do? Well, there was this big burly nurse, and she kept shouting questions at me. Are you allergic to this? Are you allergic to that? Are you allergic to anything? And I said, yes. Said, everybody got still and quiet, and they listened. And I said with all my strength, bullets. And they laughed just like you did. And he said, look, you guys, I'm choosing to live. I want you to operate on me like I'm alive, not dead. And he lived thanks to the skill of some great doctors and because of his amazing attitude. And you and I can learn from this story that every day we really do have a choice to live fully. So I want to invite you, when you think about that story, to think about the things going on in your life and to realize that in every moment we get to have a choice. Consciously or consciously, we choose where we're going to put our attention. And here in Unity, we teach that wherever we put our attention, that grows. So if I want to see the war grow, all I have to do is focus on that negative energy. But if I want to be an influence, I can send love and I can move my thoughts to God. Somebody said to me that once you're a minister, life must be easy. And what I want to say is, just like everybody else, I have my ups and my downs. But it's easier when I remember my spiritual practice. But let me get sidetracked and get negative, things aren't so easy then. The grace of being a minister is we get to talk about this every week. And guess what? After a while, some of it does rub off. The ancients in the Bible wrote, choose this day who you will serve. Will you serve God that lives inside of you? Or will you choose the world? The conscious choice that we get to make. Will I be an opening for God to love and peace in the world? Or will I go with my first reaction? You know, God doesn't ever change. God is always present. But if you and I focus on a problem, we can be sure that because of spiritual law, that what we focus on is going to increase and our problem's going to increase. When we focus on what's wrong, we are not open and receptive to the solution to our problem. But when we focus on God, love and peace comes through and guidance comes through. We get to prove every day what our belief system is. All there is God. God is the truth with a capital T. Anything less than God, anything less than love is just our opinion. We get to choose that. Michael Beckwith, who's a New Thought minister, said, take your limits off of God, and God will take his limits off of you. You and I get to do that by what we choose to think, what we choose to feel. When I came into Unity, I didn't know I had that choice. I believed what my parents had told me, that life was hard, that you had to work hard, and that frequently it was sad and bad. But I came to Unity and I heard, you're a child of God. You're a beloved child of God. God lives within you. Wow, thinking those thoughts lifted me up. And I bet that's what lifted you up when you came. When you heard that truth, that God was good, that God lived within you. That lifted you up. Psychologists tell us it takes 21 days to make something a habit. And we know that some people are habitually up and some people are habitually down. You and I get to practice where we're going to be, up or down. When I think about that word choice, it's spelled Choic. So when the ship hits the sand, we have our cues to help us remember the law of substitution. Oh, I see. This is another opportunity for me to make a new choice. Another opportunity for me to remember that God is great. If someone cuts in front of me on the I-95 as I drive home this afternoon trying to get there in time to see a musical, I can say, God, this is great. There's a little booklet by Emmett Fox published by Unity called The Golden Key. And there's only one or there's I think there's a couple of things about the Golden Key in your bookstore. But you can go online and you can look up Golden Key and you can get the full little booklet because it's not very big and read about the Golden Key. It is all about the law of substitution. And there's only 2 steps to it. The first step is to stop thinking about your problem, and the second step is to think about God instead. And that's it. It couldn't be any more simple. No matter what the problem is. I don't have a job. Think about God. My roof is damaged. Think about God. She drives me crazy. Think about God. He's nuts. Think about God. The doctor, I didn't like what the doctor had to say. Think about God. All we have to do. You and I don't have any problem that is bigger than God. We don't have a problem that God's grace won't solve. In each moment we can say, oh, whatever this is, I see that there's a mystery going on here. I don't understand this, but I know God is present and I know God is great. Oh, I see. Now is the time for me to pray to our God who is great. Now is the time for me to read my daily word and remind myself how great God is. Oh, I see. Now is the time for an affirmation. God is greater than any problem. So let's practice what we're going to say. God, that's great. Together, God. Can we do that a little more enthusiastically? God, that's great. Thinking about Perry's song. God, that's great. This week, somebody hangs up and they don't leave a message on your machine. What are we going to say? God, that's great. I don't even know why I thought that one up, because I usually like it because they're trying to sell me something. We're stuck in traffic. What are we going to say? God, that's great. The person in front of you in the express line at the grocery store has 30 items. What are we going to say? God, that's great. When it's time for the offering this morning, what are we going to say? God, that's great. God, that's great. For the next 21 days, I'd like to invite you in joining me in learning a new response to life, to find a way to say, God, that's great. Think about Jerry and his story. God, that's great. If we do that, we'll make a difference in our own life, and we'll make a difference in the world. And that, my friends, is really the truth. God, that's great.